What is up, guys? Well, with the release of the Fantastic Four First Steps this past weekend, now between theatrically released films, Disney Plus series, and special presentations, we have 53 different projects in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. It has been a while since I have done like a whole universe ranking for Marvel, partially just because it's gotten so cumbersome trying to keep up with everything, as well as, with few projects being an exception, and we'll get into all that. It hasn't been the best 4 or 5 past years for the universe. I've kind of just lost the motivation to keep talking about it as often as I used to. But we had 2 really good movies back to back. It seems like we're on a bit of an upswing that hopefully we can carry through. And so it felt like a good time to kind of update this ranking. So we're actually going to be doing it this time in a tier list format. Now, something that's going to be very different if you guys have seen any of my tier list videos in the past. I have never until now had a tier that is for things that I haven't seen. I have seen every single one of the movies in this universe, but there's a number of the Disney Plus shows that I have not bothered with, and I highly doubt I will ever get to in the future. And I knew that even if I prefaced the video by saying any of the Disney Plus series that you don't see included here, I have not seen them, I would still end up getting a bunch of comments asking where this is and where that is. So purely just to idiot-proof the entire thing and to have everything covered in one way or another, I have a haven't seen tier, which is only going to be filled with Disney Plus series. But other than that, the 5 tiers that we have that are going to be ranking all of these things on, starting at the bottom at the worst tier, we have Hail Hydra. These are for all of the projects that I just don't like whatsoever. I think they're the worst that you can find in this universe. You have Needs Avenging, which are movies that aren't necessarily bottom tier, but there's certainly a myriad of issues and should have been a lot better. We have Multiverse of Meh. These are movies that are just, they're fine. They're good. I can watch them and I'm not going to be upset about them. I didn't hate them, but I'm certainly not rushing to revisit them. Then you have Marvelous, and these are for all the really good things in here, like movies or series or special presentations that I genuinely enjoy and have a good time revisiting. And then we have Goats Assemble, and that's pretty self-explanatory, but the top tier, the best of the best, the projects in here that are pretty much all going to be movies that I think are some of the best things that this subgenre has to offer, some of my favorite comic book films of all time. This is also a public tier, so I will put the link down in the video description if you want to make your own version of this and tag me in social media, Instagram, Threads, Twitter, wherever you find me. That would be a lot of fun, so guys, go ahead and do that. Or if you'd rather not, just leave a comment down below. Let me know maybe what are some of your favorites or least favorites, or if you want to go balls out and just do a full list them all in order from 53 from worst to best. That would be cool as well. But let me know your thoughts on the Marvel Cinematic Universe down below, and let's kick this bitch off.
Language.
Important to note, I have all of these projects listed in order of release. So we're going from Iron Man all the way up to Fantastic Four, The First Steps. So with Iron Man, the very first movie back in 2008 that kicked this entire cinematic universe off, despite the fact that we have 53 projects that have continued to expand and change up and really just blow up the entire concept of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, Iron Man, the original, is still one of the absolute best. This one goes up into Goats Assemble as far as I'm concerned. There's something about the simplicity of it. There's something about of course, getting introduced to the character and the world. Robert Downey Jr. did an incredible job here, as he does anytime that he's Tony Stark, but it was really like a huge shot in the arm, especially for his career at the time. Great action sequences, great side characters, and it was a movie that is just a great movie in and of itself. None of us watched this knowing that it was going to kick off this monstrous universe until you saw the post-credit scene. And even that, it was like, huh, okay. Let's see what happens here. We don't have a good track record with making sequels and making these huge franchises, let alone universes. So yeah, Iron Man kicked it off, and it's still one of my absolute favorites. Now we have the Incredible Hulk, and to me, this might be the most unfairly underappreciated movie in this entire franchise. It's kind of the black sheep, and a lot of people don't even tend to include it, because the version of the Hulk here isn't even the version of the Hulk that carries on. That's Mark Ruffalo's Hulk. But with all that being said, this one goes up into Marvelous for me. It's not quite Goats Assemble, but this is my favorite Hulk movie. Not that there's a whole lot to choose from, but I really do enjoy this. This is one that I go back to, and it's like, man, it's a shame that we have this whole rights issue, whatever it is. I don't know the details, where I think Paramount or somebody owns something, or maybe it's Universal that owns something with Hulk, and Marvel's allowed to use them, but only in certain ways. This was a really good standalone. I actually prefer Edward Norton in the role of Bruce Banner over Mark Ruffalo. I don't know if that's a hot take or not. I like the action sequences a lot. I really like how Hulk is visualized here, even more than the Mark Ruffalo Hulk that we've seen more times than not. So, yeah, this is one that, it doesn't really have a whole lot of connective tissue to the rest of the universe, at least until Captain America Brave New World revisited it for the first time. But I really do enjoy going back to this one. I think it's severely underrated. Now we have Iron Man 2, and for a long time, this was the example you would use as MCU at its worst. And since then, it has gotten a lot better, a lot better in hindsight. This one is going to be our first one in Multiverse of Met. I was never as down on this one as everybody else to begin with, but yeah, when this came out, it was like, okay, clearly you guys rushed, and that ended up being the story. They wanted, I think, a 2-year turnaround, and Jon Favreau wanted 3. And so you can definitely tell in the script writing department that there was a lot of compromises. They were trying to rush through a lot of things to build up to the Avengers, which was a lesson they very quickly learned from and didn't really repeat much until we got to the last couple of years. But this is still a fun movie. You still get Tony Stark. You still get Robert Downey Jr. and his great acting as his character. You get some really good action sequences in here. Of course, you get Rhodey in here as his like sidekick, so it's a little bit of like having 2 Iron Man suits versus everybody. The biggest disappointment is the villain Whiplash with Mickey Rourke's performance. I think he's great at the beginning of the movie, and then the movie just kind of forgets him and doesn't really know what to do with him, and they're trying to balance him with Sam Rockwell's character, and it ends up being just another fighting a guy in an Iron Man suit when he was much more compelling as the guy with the whips. So there's issues with this movie for sure, but where we used to think that was as bad as it can get a lot worse. Now we have Thor. This is the Kenneth Branagh movie, and you know what? I really like this one. This one's going up into Marvelous. I like the Shakespearean nature of this one. There's definitely some silliness when you get the fish out of water stuff where Thor is on Earth. There's some bits that work. There's some that don't. The human characters that he is with, maybe save for Natalie Portman, isn't nearly as compelling as the group of characters as on Asgard. But I love Loki as the villain. I really like the whole thing where he's Thor before he's a hero, where he's this very selfish, pig-headed guy, and you have Anthony Hopkins comes in as just the strong dad and takes charge. There's so many elements to this, that the family side of things, like I said, that Shakespearean stuff, that I really like and I kind of miss. I hope that at some point, if we get a Thor 5, it goes back to more of this. So yeah, I dig Thor. Captain America, Captain America, the First Avenger. And this is another one that I'm going to stick up into Marvelous. I think this is a really good origin story. Now, they do kind of montage through the most interesting part of the movie, which is World War II, but I like all the buildup with his character. I think Steve Rogers is the most compelling character in the entire MCU. Of course, we all love Tony Stark. It's pretty much a tie between them, but as far as a character that is just like pure goodness, that's really what they tried to hammer home with the first half of this film. I think they did a tremendous job. I love the special effects, making Chris Evans very skinny and frail, and then as soon as he comes out of the super serum, he's, Captain America. And I think his chemistry with Haley Atwell is great. I love the side characters like Tommy Lee Jones as the drill sergeant, and Red Skull as a villain. Maybe not as interesting as he should be, but there's not really a whole lot of villains in any of these movies that are like top tier villains. That's kind of always been a recurring problem with Marvel, is their heroes very much take center stage, as they should, but even villains that should have much more of a standout presence in the movie and be much more compelling, they tend to just be supplementary. And I would say Red Skull kind of fits into that. Maybe at some point we'll get a little bit more with him besides his appearance in Endgame, but that'd be the only weakness in the film that I would say stands out quite a bit there, is the World War II montage, and the villain isn't as interesting. But Captain America as a character, hell of a kickoff. Now we have the Avengers, and this was a monstrous movie. Like, for those that weren't there, it seemed like one of the biggest things ever at the time. The first time we're going to try to do a superhero team-up film. And I think everybody expected it to suck, because it's like, it's too good to be true. They're not going to stick the landing. Like, yeah, these other movies were good, maybe save for Iron Man 2, and some people didn't even like Thor, and Even Captain America, some people weren't as hot on. Yeah, they're not going to be able to do this. There's just too much to shuffle in one movie. And then this thing just kicked ass. You went to see it and it was so much fun. Had so many great jokes and all the characters interacted so well. This one is going up in the GOATs Assemble for me. I still think it's one of the best films in this universe. The only weakness in this film, honestly, is Captain America's helmet. That's really it. Everything else I think is great. I think the plot is great. Bringing Loki back as the main villain and having the Chitauri in there as kind of the supplementary villains is great. And the third act showdown in the streets. I love all the different character interactions we get, and they all get their standout moments and standout rivalries, like between Tony Stark and Captain America, between Thor and Hulk. Having Black Widow and Hawkeye brought in there, great characters that we've continued to love ever since then. She was introduced in Iron Man 2, forgot to mention that, was a standout in that. But yeah, the Avengers, it still stands out to me as one of the most fun theater experiences I've ever had. Iron Man 3, look, haters be damned, okay? This, to me, goes up into GOATs Assemble. And I know that's my first hot take of the video. Maybe the first one, I don't know. But Iron Man 3, I've always thought was awesome. Even with the Mandarin twist, which I get it. If you're a huge comic book guy and you love the Mandarin, that's a huge step on the nuts. But I didn't have any attachment to that character. To me, it was pretty hilarious to get to the end of it. But I really love this. I think that it's great because it's a Tony Stark movie more than it's an Iron Man film. I love Shane Black. I love Shane Black. And so his writing just really works for me, with the exception of The Predator. And as a director, I think that he has pretty much all great movies too, with the exception of The Predator. And I love the side characters here and how they kind of advance in Tony's story. And I think that it's interesting how you have the Mandarin built up as kind of this mythological villain, and then it ends up being, was it Killian by the end? I get some of the complaints with this film. Other ones I just don't. I think that the comedy and the dialogue is so snappy and witty, and the action sequences are phenomenal, that this is just a really, really good Iron Man film for me. Sometimes, if you ask me, I even prefer it to the original. That's how much I like it. Now we have Thor: The Dark World, and this is another one right there with Iron Man 2 that has always kind of been the example for a long time of Marvel at its worst up until the last couple of years. And I'm not as forgiving on this one as I am Iron Man 2, but I'm still not going to put it in the bottom tier. I'm going to say it needs avenging. Now, there's good things about this. I think that there's some fun banter and fun back and forth with Thor and Loki. I think that there's some pretty decent action going on. I like how the movie starts. There's some intriguing stuff in the beginning with the Dark Elves. It just never really amounts to much, so they end up being one of the more weak and unmemorable villains of the entire MCU. It's just a movie that is kind of all over the place. It doesn't have the mythic nature or the Shakespearean stuff of the first one. It doesn't have near the fun of part 3. We'll get to part 4. But yeah, this is one that when I saw it in theaters, I was like, it was fine. It was okay. But every time I've gone back to revisit it, which I think might only be once, it's like, yeah, there's not a whole lot here. I don't hate it, but I certainly would rather just skip to another Thor movie. Captain America: The Winter Soldier. For a long time, I said this was my favorite comic book film of all time. So I guess I'll just go ahead and give that away. It's going to go up into GOATs Assemble. This is still my favorite film in the entire MCU. So if we were ranking this from best to worst, we just talked about the best one. That would be my number one. I don't know if it's still my number one favorite comic book film of all time. It's still definitely in the top 3, but that'll be a video for another day. But I absolutely adore this movie. For as much as I already loved the character of Steve Rogers, this took everything I loved about him and just amplified it. I love the fact that it's like a 70s spy thriller in the MCU. And this is back when we used to really get those cool little surprises where you'd get this interesting little subgenre within the MCU before everything kind of felt very samey. And I love what they do with the side characters with Black Widow and him having to go on the run. You have Nick Fury that seems to be killed off through a big part of the film. The revelation of the Winter Soldier. Now, I already knew that it was Bucky, but I still think that it was very well done in the movie at kind of building up to that. The action in this movie is top tier. It's still some of my favorite action, not just in the MCU, but just period. Like that elevator fight sequence would be in my top 10 favorite action sequences of all time. I absolutely love it. So this is a movie that really does not have any issues for me. Maybe the AI presence on the computer from the guy from the original film. It was a little bit hokey, but other than that, like I'm reaching to find things. This to me is like a perfect comic book film. Absolutely love it, and it was awesome to watch in the theaters. Guardians of the Galaxy, another one that I absolutely adore. It's going right up into Goats Assemble. This was a movie that I didn't expect anything from, which I think most people agreed with. Up to this point, it was like, holy shit, the MCU's awesome. And then Guardians of the Galaxy comes out, and unless you were like a comic book nerd, you're like, who the fuck are these guys? And so I expected this was maybe going to be the first like major flop from Marvel. It just felt like such a huge dice roll, and it was a dice roll that just paid off marvelously. No pun intended. This was a film that I went to go see with my my kids, and I think my brother was in town at the time. Maybe I'm remembering wrong. Maybe it was, it was some combination of that, and it was just so much fun. So much fun. Great characters, a whole ensemble of characters that we're getting introduced to the first time, and you love every single one of them. They all get their standout. They all get good character development. They all have great banter and back and forth. I loved the way they realized the cosmic side of the MCU. James Gunn's writing and direction was just on point with this one. I really do like Ronan the Accuser as a villain. He's not like top tier villain, but I don't think he's one of the worst like a lot of people make him out to be. I think he fits this movie perfect. And the soundtrack, of course, is incredible. So this is another one like Captain America Winter Soldier where I would have to sit here and like really try to think of flaws in the film because I just enjoy the living hell out of it. Avengers Age of Ultron. This is one that, I'm going to stick it up into multiverse of meh, but it's on the high end of that. And I've always kind of felt like this movie was unfairly hated on. Like people act like it's a terrible Avengers film sometimes. And I was like, I don't know, I had fun with it. But the truth is I have not watched this film since the theaters. So I have to take that into account. This is the only Avengers film, even movies that aren't titled Avengers, but are basically Avengers films, I've rewatched a couple of times. This one, I don't know, I'm just never compelled to go back. I love the Hulkbuster sequence. I think there's some really good bits in here. I think that the introduction of Wanda, of Scarlet Witch, was really well done. But I remember Ultron being a massive disappointment. I remember the writing feeling like, again, kind of going back to Iron Man 2, it feels like we're just putting a bunch of shit in here to build up to Infinity War, and the movie kind of felt a little scattered. I think that the way that they introduced Quicksilver was decent, but not very memorable, and it kind of felt like a waste of that character. It enhanced the character of Wanda, and she ends up being a great character. But at the time, I remember that being a little bit disappointing. So yeah, this is one that, I'm due for a rewatch. If I rewatched it, it might easily bump up into Marvelous, and I'm like, no, it's good. It's good. But I have not had the desire to rewatch it. So for now, I feel comfortable sticking it there. Now we have Ant-Man. And, Ant-Man's a little odd because I kind of want to stick it between Multiverse of Meh and Marvelous. I think it's a good movie, but it's also one that I'm never really compelled to rewatch. I'm going to stick it in Marvelous because I do think it's really good for what it's going for. It's just not, Ant-Man, ironically, is a very like small scale story inside of the MCU. The first two are, so they kind of feel a little odd among all the other standalone movies with these different heroes. They don't feel as big or as grand or as important. But as a little heist movie, I think it's fun. The characters are fun. Paul Rudd is really good in the role. I love seeing Michael Douglas in here. I think that Yellow Jacket was a decent villain. So yeah, this one I have a good time with. I just don't really go back to it that often. Captain America Civil War. It's not an Avengers film by title, but it is in spirit. And so this one is one of my favorites. Goes up into Goats Assemble. This was an awesome theatrical experience. They totally earned the conflict here. I think the way that they played it out in the movie was great. And you really did feel conflicted as a fan where you're like, I don't know, I see Captain America's side. I kind of see Iron Man's side. And I kind of want to go over here, but I also don't want to be against them. And so you as a fan, it was almost like mom and dad were fighting. You're like, stop, please. And the action sequences were phenomenal. I think that the introduction of the characters that we got here, Black Panther as well as Tom Holland's Spider-Man, was done really well. The third act where everything ends up going in regard to the revelations with the Winter Soldier killing Tony Stark's parents, I thought was a really well done little twist there. And people give a lot of shit to Baron Zemo as a villain, and I think he's really interesting. I think he was a compelling change of pace for the MCU. He wasn't just like this guy in a mask that they had to face off with, or the boss battle in the third act. He was this guy pulling strings and doing all this villainous shit from behind the scenes, and his motivation was very understandable. So he's not like a standout villain as far as his presence in the movie, but as far as being something very different, I always thought it was pretty cool what they did with him. So yeah, Civil War, love that one, top tier for me. Doctor Strange, this might be a hot take, but this is multiverse of meh for me. I've never been crazy about this film. I think the visuals are great, like the way that Derrickson was able to realize the powers and doing some of that Inception type stuff. It was very cool to see, just to kind of check it out in the theaters, all the special effects and the world building. And I think that Cumberbatch is really good in the role, but I think the villain's pretty lame. I think the story, this was the first time I watched an MCU film and I really felt the template where I'm like, this feels like Iron Man and Thor and all the other ones kind of, but just a little different skin on it. And I never really got over that. I've rewatched this film since, and I still find myself a little bit disengaged and bored with it. So fascinating world building, but everything else in here, not really for me. Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. This is another one that goes into multiverse of meh. Now, I have raised my reception of this one a little bit. Back when Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 came out, they did this little thing in IMAX theaters where they played all three of them in a marathon. And while it was kind of an exhausting night to watch three movies back to back, it was a really fun night. And so you got to watch Guardians of the Galaxy, which I love, then go right into Volume 2, which I always had a lot of issues with, and then followed up with watching the third one for the first time, which will be higher than this in this list. And something about watching it in that experience, it kind of softened the blow of the movie for me. Like some of the things in it I didn't care for as much. If I remember correctly, felt like they actually were fixed a little bit in Volume 3. Watching them sandwiched in there without any lag time also kind of made me less frustrated with the movie and less disappointed with it. So I still don't think it's anywhere near as good as the first one or the third one, but previous to that watch, I probably would have stuck it in Needs Avenging. So I'm warming up to it slightly. Still think it was a pretty big downgrade. Spider-Man Homecoming. This is another one like Ant-Man that I kind of feel like I need a tier in the middle here because I enjoy this film, but I also have a lot of frustrations with it. But since I do enjoy it overall, I'm going to stick it up into Marvelous. Spider-Man Homecoming, it was a very interesting type of origin story for Spider-Man, or at least his first outing. I wouldn't call it an origin story. And I think that Vulture as a villain was great. Michael Keaton was awesome. I enjoyed some of the high school banter and back and forth they were going for. I don't think it was quite the Breakfast Club. You know, they were really pushing that as kind of a pitch, and I don't really feel like they nailed that at all. Maybe that was part of my initial disappointment with it. Of course, I love Tom Holland in the role. And while I love Tony Stark as a character, I've always been frustrated that in all of these movies with Tom Holland, he's never able to just stand on his own. He always has to have somebody with him. He always has to have somebody propping him up or somebody that's like on the poster to help market it. And I think that's a disservice to the Spider-Man character. You know, when we get to No Way Home, there's a reason why that movie made fucking $2 billion or whatever the hell it was, because it was a bunch of different Spider-Men on screen. And that was the selling point. But yeah, Tony Stark here, it's kind of a love-hate relationship. So Spider-Man Homecoming is enjoyable, but I'm not somebody that thinks that it's as good as the Tobey Maguire films or, you know, even some of the Andrew Garfield films, but still good. Thor Ragnarok. This is my personal favorite of the Thor films. Do I want to stick it up into Goats Assemble, though? You know what? Yes, I am. I'm going to stick it up into Goats Assemble because I really do love this one. I think this one's an absolute blast. You know, this was Taika Waititi doing his Thor thing and actually getting the mix right. We'll revisit that here very shortly. But I loved the tone they got here, where Thor still had some of that mythic Shakespearean element to the different family members and his sister coming in to reclaim the throne and everything, but it was a lot more fun. You know, the humor was hitting hard, his jokes and his back and forth and his rivalry with Hulk was great. The scene where they face off was awesome. You get Loki yet again in here and having some great moments himself. And this was just a really fun film. And, you know, where it all goes in the third act, actually having Ragnarok happen to Asgard was really cool. So this is one that is one of the more fun movies in the MCU for me. Black Panther. This is going to be one I'm definitely going to get a little hate for. I'll stick it in Marvelous. I'll stick it in Marvelous. This is another one where I wish I had another tier there. I don't like having multitudes of tiers, so sometimes you have those that kind of feel like they could go between. Look, Black Panther, I totally understand and totally appreciate the cultural significance of the film. I understood completely from the get why it was this huge deal when it came out, and why a lot of people still hold it in very high regard because of that. In and of itself, though, I don't think it's one of the stronger Marvel movies. Like, I think that the performances are great. I love the character. I love the world of Wakanda. I think that Michael B. Jordan's a great villain and Killmonger. Another thing like Thor that kind of has a little bit of that Shakespearean nature. It's kind of like Lion King in the MCU. But the special effects in this movie were a huge letdown. All the fights really looked rubbery with the way that Black Panther was realized. He looked significantly better in motion in Civil War. And overall, the story just didn't really hit me the way that it hit a lot of other people. Maybe it's because it had too many similarities to The Lion King and movies like that, even The Lion King is not original. That's like Hamlet, basically. So this is one that I've never been all that high on, like a lot of other people. And it's one that's kind of controversial to say that because of the cultural significance. So understanding that I am somebody that is not going to be emotionally moved about that. Hopefully you respect the fact that I'm just judging it as a movie. And that is where I put it on a good day. There's some days where like I said, I toy with putting it in the tier just below it. Marvel's Avengers Infinity War. This one goes up into Goats Assemble. This was monstrous. I remember all the excitement, all the buzz, all the craziness, packed out theaters, sold out. I miss those days, when it wasn't just huge movies that did that. It was, you get a couple of those a year where it felt like everybody was buzzing about it. And this was one that was just very exciting because it was like what we got with the Avengers, only like times 100, where it's like, we're not just assembling a group of 5 heroes, we're assembling all of these different people, like all the people from the Avengers, plus the Guardians of the Galaxy, plus the Black Panther and all these other new characters. And it was also the first time that we get a movie focused on Thanos, who's a villain that we've been building up to for quite a while. And the movie delivered. It didn't feel overstuffed. It didn't feel like anybody got shortchanged. Me, selfishly, as a Captain America fan, I wanted more Captain America in it, but I do love his entrance. And narratively, it makes sense why he's kind of off in the shadows, quite literally. And Thanos, this is basically his movie. He's kind of the main character of the film in a lot of ways. And I thought he was a fantastic villain. Absolutely worth all the buildup. Totally delivered that. But I never for a second really felt the weight of it because it was like, oh, well, they're going to come back in the next one. Like, it just didn't feel real to me. And so I know a number of people that have this as like #1 best of the entire universe, or their #1 comic book film of all time because of all the things that I do like about it, added in with the fact that they were devastated at the final act of that film and walked out like emotionally broken. I just didn't have that experience with it. Maybe if I did, I'd have it even higher, even though this, I think it's in my top 3 of the MCU, so I'm not spitting on it by any means. But yeah, the ending, as wild and as powerful as it's intended to be, the fact that the MCU had already so many deaths and revivals at this point where they had played that card way too many times, even when I got to this and it's supposed to be like, oh no, they're really dead. I'm like, nope. Well, just wait till Endgame. They'll be back. It's okay, guys. They'll be back. Now we have Ant-Man and the Wasp, and this is one that honestly I have not seen since theaters. I have watched Ant-Man a couple of times, so I'm kind of going off of memory. I don't remember liking it as much as Ant-Man, so I'm going to stick this one up in Multiverse of Meh. It's just because I've never been compelled to rewatch it. I think when I saw it, it was fine, and I was fairly entertained, and I wasn't necessarily disappointed in it, but it's just one of those that gets lost in the mix. There's so many movies and so many shows and everything in this universe that there's some that I'll just never really be that compelled to rewatch. And Ant-Man and the Wasp is one of them. So that's about all I have to say on that one. I remember some sequences. I remember him getting giant for the first time and using a pickup truck as a skateboard or something. I remember Wasp being a cool character. And you got Walton Goggins in here, and I love him. And then Michelle Pfeiffer, I think, was revealed as the person who's the villain or something like that. Don't quote me on that. But yeah, there's things I remember about it, but it's just kind of one of those, it left my mind, and so it is what it is. Captain Marvel. Man, this one's always a lightning rod for controversy, isn't it? This one's going to go into multiverse of meh for me, but it's not because I hate Brie Larson. I don't know why Brie Larson is like the internet's favorite punching bag. She's a great actress. I don't necessarily think Captain Marvel is a showcase of that or the Marvels, but I don't think that's her fault. I think that's the way that the character was written. It's the way that she's directed to be. And that's part of the problem with Captain Marvel is that this is the origin for the character, and she's just not that interesting or likable of a character. And, you know, she's very kind of quiet and cocky and very much is just somebody that she doesn't hit the way that all the other characters have in their origin stories, like literally all the other ones. And it's not because she's a woman. It's just because the character, I just think, was poorly written in this first film. And the way that it's narratively structured, you kind of are meeting her in present time, but having to go back and see the origin and flashbacks. And so you're kind of piecemealed her story in a way that's not necessarily satisfying. I like seeing her back and forth with Nick Fury and, you know, the 90s side of that. But even that, you know, this was a movie that they're like, oh, it's going to show how he got the scar because we see that he doesn't have one here. And the answer you get for that is like, really? There's times where the MCU goes for humor and it's like, please don't make everything a fucking joke, please. Not everything has to be a little gag. So I remember that being really stupid. And I couldn't tell you shit about the villain. I know it was Jude Law, but yeah. So this is one I watched in theaters and I went, okay, maybe she'll be better in Endgame. Hopefully, maybe. Now we have Endgame, and Endgame to this day, and there's a good shot it will be number one for the rest of my life. The best theater experience I ever had, and it goes up into Goats Assemble. This was absolutely incredible. For as massive as Avengers Infinity War felt in the theaters, Endgame was like a nerdgasm. I mean, it was like a sporting event. I've never experienced a movie like this where you get these huge fan service moments where everybody felt compelled in that moment to be like, yeah, and like stand up, fucking high five. People are throwing their arms up and cheering. I mean, when Cap catches Mjolnir, when you hear on your left and they start to come through the portals, and like so many different moments in that last act especially was some of the most excited that I have ever been to be in a theater, and some of the best, absolute best theater experience. Removing all of that at home, obviously you don't have all that, and I still think it's a really great movie. I think that it's very, very satisfying. It's a phenomenal send-off for a number of these characters, and if the MCU had ended there, it would have been a legendary run, like almost immaculate run. I think that the way that the story plays out, where it's kind of a time travel story, is fun because I love those types of movies, and having certain a very small scale version of the Avengers, because so many of them are dead, having to re-team up and save everybody else, and all the different ways they go about that, revisiting some of the scenes from earlier films, which was very fun. And of course, the third act battle, just having different characters do different standout things in there. And of course, the I am Iron Man moment and Cap finally getting his dance. I mean, there was just so many things. It was one of the most satisfying fan experiences I ever had in my life. And I love the movie for that. So yes, it goes up into Goats Assemble. Spider-Man Far From Home. You know, there's a number of people who are really down on this film. Even my buddy Sean Chandler has always been pretty rough on this one. But I think this one is right up there with Homecoming for me. You know, sometimes I might even prefer it. So I'm going to stick it up there into Marvelous. I have fun with this. Is there elements of the plot that's incredibly stupid? Yeah. Like Tony Stark leaves his nuclear weapon sunglasses to a teenager who was dead for 4 years with no instructions and no guidance and just lets the chips fall where they may. Yeah, it's pretty fucking dumb. The whole thing where you have Mysterio going through this entire plot so that he can get Tony Stark's glasses and be a hero. And it's like, what are you going to do when the first actual villain shows up? Yeah, it's pretty dumb. But other than that, which are significant issues and people that are more down on it for those reasons, I get it. I have a lot of fun with this. I like the fish out of water side of them being in foreign countries. I like Nick Fury's interactions with Spider-Man. You know, bitch, you've been to space. Great moment. Mysterio and Jake Gyllenhaal's performance, I think, is awesome. And I really liked the twist. The logic of it doesn't quite work, but I liked the twist reveal. And, you know, we all knew he was a villain. We're just waiting to see when the shoe's going to drop and what exactly the point of him doing all this is. And the sequences where Mysterio is messing around with Spider-Man is some of the coolest visual shit that we've gotten from any Spider-Man film. And where it eventually lands at the end with him killing Mysterio and then Mysterio letting his identity out to the entire world and letting that be the end point, that was a big holy shit moment for me. So, yeah, Spider-Man Far From Home, I really enjoy this one. You know, this is one that I probably have a bit more fun with than Homecoming. I just think it has a few less story flaws, or it has a few more story flaws than Homecoming. So, I don't know. They're both fun. Now we have reached our first Disney Plus series. Now, as I said earlier, there are a lot of these that I have not seen, and I'll give a little context to that. But WandaVision, of course, I saw. This was really an exciting thing where, you know, not only because we had COVID at this point, so it was like, please give us something to watch, but it was a very exciting thing to see Marvel pushing into TV series, and we all had these high hopes for it. And WandaVision was one, well, let me place it first. I'm going to stick it in Multiverse of Meh. This is one that I had a lot of conflicting feelings about as it aired. I thought the concept of them mimicking TV shows from different eras was very cool and creative, and I think they did a great job at doing that. But to me, it felt like it was just kind of a novelty for the first number of episodes, where I'm like, this is cute, but like, I don't know, I'm not really compelled with what's going on here. Whatever little mystery they're building, they're not building it strong enough for me. And so I was a little down on it at first. And then you get about 6 or 7 episodes in, and suddenly they're doing a great job at building intrigue, where they're introducing characters like Quicksilver from the X-Men universe, and there's all these little reveals going on about what's going on with this town and what Wanda's actually doing, and starting to unpeel that onion a little bit about what WandaVision actually is, where this became a really fun show to discuss week to week, and brought back some of that water cooler conversation for the first time in a while. And then by the end of the show, I think they totally shit the bed. So I actually did a video around episode 7 where I said I was wrong about WandaVision. I'm like, yeah, this show is actually pretty damn cool. I'm totally bought in. And then 2 or 3 episodes later, I'm like, never mind. I didn't like it. So I didn't like the way that it played out by the end of it. It felt like certain things weren't completely earned. It felt like they tried to be too Marvel by the end of it. Like, it had to be a comic book movie by the end. We had to have a fight. We had to have a white vision and all this stuff, where the intrigue and the novelty of it had kind of worn off at that point. So it ended up being a very messy, mixed bag for me. So not nearly as high on WandaVision as a lot of other people. Then we had The Falcon and the Winter Soldier. I'm going to stick this one in Needs Avenging. And this is one that is heartbreaking, because this is after seeing how much WandaVision was creating all this crazy buzz. I dedicated every single episode of Falcon and the Winter Soldier. I was going to do a standalone review, because I love Captain America. Of course, Winter Soldier, as I said, is up there, and Civil War. And so I was like, this is going to be awesome. I'm going to cover this week to week, because I missed out on that with WandaVision. And you can watch those videos and you can see myself kind of convincing myself that I like it more than I actually do, where I'm like, hey, it's kind of cool. And, I'm not sure about this other Captain America guy, the discount Captain America, but, we get to see Baron Zemo, and maybe we'll get to see a little bit more of him. He kind of felt like he didn't do a whole lot. And it ended up being a show by the end of it where I was like, I don't really know, I love these characters, but this didn't feel like it really accomplished anything. It was just like a 5 or 6 episode drawn out reason to give Sam the shield, which he already did that at the end of Endgame. So it was like you trying to justify to all the people that didn't like that decision. And his suit looked really weird and corny. And even the way that it was written in the final episode, where he's given the lecture to the senator, is like, I'm not buying this, dude. I love Anthony Mackie, but I'm not buying this. So yeah, this is one that as I was watching it, I was like a lot higher on the individual episodes. And then when I got the entire thing, I was just like, yeah, that didn't work at all. So yeah, that's going to go down right there. Loki is the first one it's going to go into haven't seen either season. I've heard that it's good. These are one of the only shows on here that I've heard good things about. I just haven't had the interest to go back and check it out. The rest of them, for the most part, it's because I never heard anything good about them. But yeah, Loki, I just didn't care. The character had been dead and then revived, and then dead and been revived, and then dead for real in Infinity War, but we're going to do a show anyway. And so I was kind of tired of the character, to be honest with you. Black Widow, Multiverse of Meh. This one's okay. I think that the back and forth between her and Florence Pugh was great. There's some decent action in the first 2 acts of the film. Of course, Red Guardian was a great addition here. The side characters are the best part here. The other family members that we get introduced to who that have since gone on to Thunderbolts. But it felt way too late. Like, why we're getting a Black Widow film that we've been asking for years, only after the character was killed off in Endgame, felt strange. And where it goes in the third act, it feels like it was just reshot and rewritten and retooled and got absolutely ridiculous. And the special effects were terrible. And so, yeah, it's a movie I watched once, immediately forgot about. And the best part about it, I get to enjoy in Thunderbolts. What If? Never watched it, so I can't tell you what if. Not big into animation stuff, the whole what if scenario. I've heard there's some good segments. I heard some of the things are interesting, but I just never had any interest in it. Shang-Chi. This is one that I actually like quite a bit. This is going to go up into Marvelous. You know, at this point, I was a little unsure. I'm like, I don't know about Shang-Chi. Like, Marvel feels like they're not really doing too good right now. You know, 2021 was not the best year for Marvel. And then you got to Shang-Chi, which was when? That was 2021, September. So yeah, you get to the end of the year and I'm like, I don't know, man. And I didn't know anything about the character. And I really dug this one. You know, it's kind of like a old school Jackie Chan type film with the stunts, but then like super over the top and Marvelized. I would love it even more if it wasn't so over the top and super power centric. Like when he's doing the whole bus fight, if it was just a legit stunt piece instead of having so much extra help with computers. I think this movie might even be Goats Assemble. But yeah, I dig the character. I love the fact that they revisit the Mandarin and they kind of, you know, fix that issue. As I said, it was never an issue for me, but I'm glad they at least addressed it and made some kind of canonical sense. And to me, it makes Iron Man 3 way more defendable now, because that's always the thing that people say. It's like, you love Iron Man 3 and the way that they fucked up the Mandarin. And I'm like, well, they fixed it in Shang-Chi, so now you can watch this and you don't have to bitch about that, right? But yeah, Shang-Chi, great action sequences, a great introduction to a character that strangely we have not seen again. I don't know why. And a really compelling villain. So I dug that one, enjoyed that one quite a bit. Eternals. This is one I'm sticking in needs avenging. This is a love-hate movie, and it's very passionate when people get into it. I get why some people would like this one because it's very unique to the point where it feels foreign to the MCU, and some people like that about it. To me, it was always kind of a detriment. I never really got interested in these characters too much. Some were more interesting than others, but it was just such an odd like side project feel to me that never really felt like it belonged in the MCU. And beyond that, I don't really remember the story. There's certain characters that you only learn about in flashbacks that kind of felt like I wanted to know more about them in present time. The reveals by the end of who the villain is. It's like, okay, I don't know. I'm not really compelled by this either. And you get introduced to Blade in a post-credit sequence where it's his voice, where nobody who's a Blade fan knew that until like different outlets started saying, hey, did you catch the post-credit scene with Blade? I'm like, fuck, no, I didn't. Which theater are they playing that in? So yeah, I haven't seen it in a long time. I haven't watched it since theaters, so I can't give more context to why. I just didn't really care for it. But this was one that just did not work for me whatsoever. So is what it is. Hawkeye, unfortunately, has to go into haven't seen as well, but I did watch the first couple of episodes. I think Uncle Sean told me that I would really like this one because there were so many others that I just wasn't really digging, and it just didn't hook me. So I watched a couple episodes, and I was like, I don't know. This feels like the other ones. I just don't care. So I could tell you there's certain things about it that I liked, but I haven't seen all of it, so I'm just not going to even talk about the whole thing. Spider-Man No Way Home. This one, look, I get that the setup is pretty stupid, but I fucking love it. It's going up into Goats Assemble. Like, I don't necessarily want to have the future of the MCU or any type of filmmaking be surrounded by just nostalgia bait. But the two movies here that are total nostalgia bait, I absolutely love. So I'm kind of my own worst enemy. No Way Home was a fantastic theater experience. Once you get past some of the silliness of the Doctor Strange setup, it is such a huge reward for Spider-Man fans, especially the movie side of things. I've always loved Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man films, so it was amazing to see him back. I think they did a great job at kind of redeeming Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man, who he was always fantastic. It's just his movies were never near as good as he was. And this kind of felt like a bit of a a swan song for him, to the point where a lot of people were like, hey, all those stupid ass little Spider-Man villain origin stories, why don't you make that like in Andrew Garfield's world and actually give us some Andrew Garfield movies while we're doing this? Legally, I guess there was reasons they didn't want to do that, but I'd be totally up for it. But this was great to see all the different villains come back together, and the storyline about how Peter Parker is trying to find a way to get them home without sending them to their dark fate of Spider-Man killing them, and having the whole thing with Doc Ock being redeemed and turned good and fixing his little inhibitor chip, and then having Green Goblin come back. And if you had any doubts or any issues whatsoever with Willem Dafoe in that original movie because of the Power Ranger suit, pretty much put all that to bed. I think he was a phenomenal villain here, did all the acting with his face with the Goblin stuff. And you get some really cool revelations here with Aunt May being the one that gives him the responsibility speech, and this ends up being kind of reverse engineered origin for Spider-Man in a lot of ways. And by the end of it, it promises us, which it doesn't seem like we're going to get, a totally standalone classic Spider-Man story in the future for Tom Holland. Now, they've already announced the new Spider-Man movie, which I guess comes out next year. It's going to have the Punisher in it, and I think maybe even the Hulk. So not going to get that, but at the time, it was very exciting. But yeah, I love No Way Home. You know, it could have been better. They could have found a better way to get the plot moving, but I think it's so rewarding once you get past that. Moon Knight. I did watch this one, and this one needs avenging. There was some really, really cool stuff in the first couple of episodes where they're doing like the schizophrenia and the different personalities and how he swaps in and out between him and Moon Knight. The effects of him turning into Moon Knight was cool. First episode sold me. I was like, fuck yeah, I'm in. This one's going to be great. And like pretty much all the other Disney Plus shows that I've seen, where it feels like some weird compromise between doing a movie and doing an actual full-on TV show. You just get like this little 6-episode thing. So you get some nice, intriguing stuff built in the front end of it, and then it feels like we're rushing to the end, and then we get this unsatisfying, like, Megazord fight. So I was massively disappointed with Moon Knight, and all that did was kind of reaffirm for me that I'm like, I'm not watching any more of these Disney Plus shows. I'm done. Until I get somebody that tells me, this one's amazing, you need to check this one out, I'm not bothering with it. So yeah, Moon Knight was kind of the straw that broke the camel's back, and the camel already had some fucked up back problems before that. Doctor Strange, Multiverse of Madness. I seem to be much higher on this one than everybody else. To me, this one's marvelous. I thought this movie was awesome. Like, there's definitely a bit of a identity crisis here. Like, there's spots where it's very clear this was directed by Sam Raimi, and those are the best parts of the film. And then there's others where it's like, I feel like anybody could have directed this. It almost feels like he just passed this off to Kevin Feige in these moments. So those moments of the film are not nearly as strong. And there's definitely some validity to people saying that the whole sequence where you get fan casted Reed Richards and you get Patrick Stewart back, a number of other characters, it kind of feels like that's just cameo porn, and then they're dispatched quickly. I get that argument, but I also would say, to be devil's advocate, that it really just establishes how powerful and how ruthless Wanda is in that moment, and I think it's very effective at that. So I think that there's a nice balance there. Like, could they have done more? Sure, but I think it's just a little fun Easter egg added to a really cool scene where she just gets to fuck shit up. If you haven't seen WandaVision, you're not going to understand this movie at all. And that was the first time I got worried going, oh God, am I going to have to watch these shows? Otherwise, I'm just going to be clueless whenever I get to things. And they've since said they're not going to do that. So thank God they learned their lesson. I think this one's much more fun and much more interesting than the original Doctor Strange with where things go. I like the darker, more horror element to it. And the sequences that Sam Raimi directs the shit out of course, are big in that, where you very much get Evil Dead style Sam Raimi, which is great. I love the resurrected zombie Doctor Strange at the end here. So this is one that I have a lot of fun with. I saw it in theaters twice. And, you know, maybe it's because I'm a horror guy. The fact that we get a horror movie in the MCU, I'm a lot more inclined to be forgiving on it than others. But I genuinely think that's a great movie. Now we have Miss Marvel. Didn't see it. So move on from that one. Thor: Love and Thunder. This is my least favorite thing that I've ever seen from the MCU. This one goes into Hail Hydra. I hate this movie.
You suck.
Yeah, jackass. This to me was such a massive disappointment. I loved Thor Ragnarok. You had Taika Waititi coming back. We're going to bring Natalie Portman back and have her be like Lady Thor, which I was kind of intrigued with. And we had Christian Bale in here as the God Killer villain. Like there was so many things advertised where I was like, oh yeah, this one's going to kick ass. And I did not enjoy this movie at all, to the point where it soured me on Taika Waititi as a fucking director. Where I'm just like, I'm done with you. Nothing else from you, please. I hated what they did to Thor's character. They made him a bumbling idiot in here. And I don't know if it was to prop up the lady version of Thor or what they were doing. They just leaned too much in the humor, but he's a dumbass in this movie. So I hated that. The whole Lady Thor thing felt weird, and having like a love triangle with Mjolnir. I don't know what was going on with that. The special effects are god awful in this movie. Like there's a point where his mask, his helmet is actually CGI, and it's like, good Lord, you couldn't have made a fucking prop. The thing that's always been made fun of the floating kid's head. Awful. And even Christian Bale, he's doing fantastic work here, but he is in the total wrong movie. His character arc and the story and the origin of him and his motivations, awesome in any movie that actually takes itself seriously. This is the one movie in the MCU that takes itself the least seriously, and so he stands out like a sore thumb. The jokes in here are just way off. The fucking screaming goats, flicking Thor's underwear off, and having what was it, like infinity cones, like an ice cream shop that's making fun of genocide, and it's like, that makes no sense. Like, I don't know what the hell happened here, but Taika Waititi, it just felt like they gave him full reins, and he needs some reins on him. He needs some people to say no, because what the hell was this? Now we have She-Hulk. And I have seen one episode of She-Hulk, and that is thanks to Uncle Sean. I'm going to stick it and haven't seen, but yeah, he showed me the first episode. They were like 4 or 5 episodes in at the point where I was staying at his house for Fantastic Fest, and he put it on as just like an endurance test for me, where he's like, I know you're going to hate it, but I want to watch your face while you hate it. And yeah, I mean, the concept, I love Tatiana Maslany, and the concept of having kind of like a sitcom, like a Ally McBeal or something like that with She-Hulk. Like, it could have been really fun, but I did not enjoy the first episode. I absolutely hated the dialogue between her and Hulk. Like the whole thing about like, I get catcalled, so I actually understand grief more than you do. I don't know what the fuck. Like there's times where I get very annoyed and I roll my eyes when people are like, it's woke, or it's virtue signaling. I'm like, God, it can't be every fucking movie out there. Like, you're looking for it. And then you get things like this where it's like, yeah, you're right about this one. You're right about this one. But it's not every movie. So, yeah, without having seen the rest of the series, I know a number of things that happen. Of course, I see the clips of the twerking, and I know how things played out with Kevin Feige being an AI bot, and they're kind of roasting the fans and the haters. And this is another one like Thor: Love and Thunder, where it's like, what the fuck was this? No, thank you. No, thank you. Werewolf by Night. This one I'm going to stick, for what it is. Like, I would never, if I was ranking this like based on numbers, it would not be anywhere near as high as my reception of some of these, but I'm going to stick it in Marvelous because I think it's a great version of what it's trying to be, which is just this little hour special presentation thing. Now, the story of how I saw this is much more interesting to me than the thing itself. I won't go into massive detail, but this actually premiered at Fantastic Fest, my first year that I ever went, and it was a secret screening. And so, long story short, one of the more popular guesses of what this secret screening this day was going to be was Halloween Ends or Halloween Kills, whichever year it was. And so there was this prospect of maybe I'm going to be in the room with Jamie Lee Curtis and watching the new Halloween film, which I'm going to be able to review a month early, and it's going to do gangbusters views for my channel. It's going to be this awesome moment. Even if the movie sucks, it's going to be this awesome thing. And there was a lot of build up to it, and ended up being Werewolf by Night, which is something that I would have been my least interested option if I was able to pick what the secret screening was. But anyway, this is something that very much goes back to like the Universal Monsters type stuff with the black and white, and they're able to get away with it because it's in black and white, but it's actually gory, where people are getting like their heads torn off and blood splattering. And it's just an old school werewolf story that's got Swamp Thing and a few other things in here to make it more superhero, more Marvel cinematic. But it's really well done. So I wish it was more. Like, if there was a movie version of this would be probably even higher if they did a really good job with it. But for what it is, just a little special presentation, a little fun thing that exists, I think it's a very good version of itself. It's not something I would go back to and rewatch, but it's very well done. Black Panther Wakanda Forever. This is one that when I first saw it, I was a lot higher on it. I think I even said I like this more than the original Black Panther. I don't think that I would stick to that. This is a movie that was dealt an incredibly bad hand. I'm still going to stick it in. This is another one where I wish I had one between Marvelous and Multiverse of Meh. I'm going to stick it in Marvelous for the only reason being that tips it over into that versus Multiverse of Meh, that they were dealt an impossible hand with this film. You literally had the star of Black Panther die tragically of cancer, kind of out of nowhere. And so whatever plans they had for this character immediately get burned. And now they have this very impossible task of deciding, do we continue on without him and recast him and act as if Chadwick Boseman was just this, this casting that happened that we have to move on from? Or do we actually live in this moment? Do we feel this? Do we have our characters feel this? And, I don't think either would have satisfied everybody. I think in hindsight, it would have been better for the character to recast him. And I think at some point they may go that route, because I don't think anybody's very satisfied with Shuri being Black Panther. And there's a reason why we haven't seen Black Panther show up in anything since. And I don't think Black Panther is going to be a major player in Avengers Doomsday, but maybe I'll be wrong. But this film is essentially like an extended wake. It's a funeral of sorts, where from the beginning, you're not really given a reason why, I don't think, but, Black Panther is dead, T'Challa is dead, and now all of the other characters, his mom, his sister, his love interest, everybody has to move on and figure out a way to go on without him. That's kind of the plot and the point of the film. So I feel like it's a very cathartic thing to exist that the fans kind of needed and the stars of the film very much needed. But now that that time has passed, it does feel very odd. And it feels like a movie that I would never revisit, because even though there are good things here, namely the performances, I mean, Angela Bassett, I think, was nominated for Best Supporting Actress, and she deserved it. I would say she deserved it over the winner, Jamie Lee Curtis. But it's a movie that is just very dark and depressing. And there's no reason to ever really go back to it. And the side that you go to it, if you want to get past all that, like the action and the Marvel stuff, I don't think that's very exciting. So it's kind of a hard one to place. I don't think I would rewatch this one ever again. And the reasons for that is just because it's just not an enjoyable movie because of the nature of it. But I think with the hand that Ryan Coogler was dealt, and for the amount of things that they had to figure out here, I think it's incredible that it turned out to be as good as it did. All right, Guardians of the Galaxy, the Holidays Special. This one, just like with Werewolf by Night, like I don't put it on the same pedestal as the movies here that I love, but for what it's trying to be, I'm going to stick it in Marvelous. It's just a fun little 40-minute Christmas special where Drax and Mantis go off to kidnap Kevin Bacon as a Christmas present for Peter Quill. And it's very fun. It's very fun if you're a Kevin Bacon fan, especially. Not every joke in it works. I don't necessarily like the animated bookend to it. I think the animation style is weird. But the entire bit of kidnapping Kevin Bacon as a present and where that eventually goes and the musical number, it's fun for what it is. I don't know if I would rewatch it every Christmas or anything like that. I've only seen it once, but it's fun. Ant-Man and the Wasp, Quantumania. This is one that I'm actually this might be a hot take. I'm only going to stick it in Needs Avenging. I don't think it's anywhere near as bad as people make it out to be, but it's not good. This is the movie that came out and everybody was like, oh my God, this sucks. This is the worst thing they've ever done. And I just don't think it's that bad. Like it's a big missed opportunity. It was an absolute botched introduction, like cinematically, of the character Kang, who since doesn't even matter. But even if he was going to be the big bad and we stayed the course and Jonathan Majors didn't have all the massive issues that he had, that it was a very failed introduction to this character. It's like Ant-Man kicked his ass, but we're supposed to be scared that he's going to, kill the whole universe. How's that work? There's moments here between the characters that I think are fun. And I think the overall chemistry of the cast of Ant-Man carries over here. I like the fact that Ant-Man gets a little bit more of a large-scale story, and it's not always just him trying to do a little, New York heist or something like that, whatever city he's in. But yeah, for the promises that this movie made, which was, kicking off a phase, introducing us to our next Thanos, a number of other things, it fell very short of what everybody expected. So I'm not nearly as negative on it as others. I felt that it was a little overhated, but it's definitely, bottom tier Marvel. Now we have Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. And this one, I'm not quite on the level of Goats Assemble like of other people, like a lot of other people are, but it's definitely marvelous. And it's high on that list. I think that this was a fantastic send-off and a great trilogy wrapper where you have very emotional stuff here. Like, this might be the most emotional that I got for any of these movies, even Infinity War Endgame. Like, everything going on with Rocket was heartbreaking. And maybe that's one of the reasons I haven't revisited it, because it's a very emotional and kind of a dark movie, but it's very satisfying. It's very fun. It's very sweet. It's very heartwarming. You will definitely cry watching it. It's got a really good soundtrack, not nearly as good as the first one, but better than the second one. And there's some good action sequences in here as well. I like the fact that it's the MCU movie that finally brought the word fuck into the universe. Whatever that's worth, I like that. So yeah, narratively, just as a closeout for this team, I think it did a fantastic job at being more of a return to form. And, there's a lot of people that think this is as good or better than the first one. I'm not one of them, but I really, really enjoyed this one. And it was great to see James Gunn come back. That was a whole thing that was wild, where he was fired, and then Guardians of the Galaxy 3 felt like it wasn't going to happen. And then literally the whole cast was like, yeah, fuck you, Disney. We're not doing it if he doesn't come back. And, the whole cancel culture thing totally about faced with him, and he got to come back as a guy that's about to do DC and do his last Marvel film, and did a great job as a send-off. Secret Invasion, never seen it. I'm noticing now that my Hail Hydra tier is going to be very empty, because seemingly a lot of shows that would absolutely be there, like She-Hulk and Secret Invasion, from what I've heard how bad that is, I've never seen. So this might be a very top-heavy list, which I'm a little surprised by. The Marvels. This is one that, just like with Quantumania, I think is a little overhated. It's not one of my favorites, but this is a film that just felt like it was absolutely decimated by reshoots and shuffling of power. And, there's the whole controversy with, Nia DaCosta, who is the credited director here. I feel terrible for her, where she basically openly said, like, yeah, that's not my movie. That's Kevin Feige's movie. Like, they took it from me and they did whatever they wanted with it, and they reshot this and did that. And it wasn't because she was fucking it up. It was just like, at that point, you had these people, these figureheads inside of Disney and Marvel that were just running everything and doing their own thing over the creatives. And so you have somebody who's already proven to be a very, very talented director, but doesn't really have a whole lot of pull, and doesn't really have like a legacy behind her. She's done, one significant movie, Candyman. And so she was very easy to just kind of credit and then push out of the way. But the movie, when you watch it, I think does have some fun moments. I think that the three main characters here do have a fun dynamic. I think that Captain Marvel is much more enjoyable in this movie, but unfortunately she's sharing the screen with two other characters, so she doesn't really feel like the main character here. You have Miss Marvel here, who is a lot of fun. And I enjoyed her enough where I toyed with the notion of actually watching her show, but I still have not had the interest to actually click play. And I think that it's a very colorful and kind of a fun movie that's kind of out there. I don't remember anything about the villain plot or what they're trying to fight here. So, that kind of says everything that I need to say about that. And it definitely felt like a cobbled movie, where it's like, this was not supposed to be this, but it turned out to be 5 or 6 other people's ideas that all got put into one thing. And, it turned out to be, I think, the lowest grossing film in the entire universe. So that's the legacy that it has. But with Quantumania, I did not hate it. I did not hate it like I did Thor: Love and Thunder. I just thought it was definitely disappointing. Echo, haven't seen it. Deadpool and Wolverine. We have made our way back into Goats Assemble, bitches. Look, I understand. Just like with No Way Home, I get some arguments of why people don't like this film, and they think it's just cameo porn, and it's just jokes, and it's silly and ridiculous, and the plot doesn't make sense. Look, to me, this movie is operating under the rules of a comedy, which means there's a lot of shit that doesn't make sense sometimes. A lot of times the plot or certain things going on in a comedy is pretty ridiculous or far-fetched or over the top. But if it pays off in a really great joke, I don't fucking care. And Deadpool and Wolverine made me laugh my ass off. That was the hardest that I've laughed in a theater in years. It's not a comedy in and of itself. Like, it's a comic book film. It's got action. It's got sci-fi. There's just a lot of comedy strength here because of the character Deadpool. But if I was to categorize it as a comedy, to me, that's the best comedy I've seen in like 8 or 9 years. I loved having Hugh Jackman back. I was very nervous about that, where I'm like, are they going to kind of ruin the legacy of Logan here, which was a perfect send-off? I don't think it ruined it at all. I think it was a great thing to finally have the novelty of these two characters and these two actors on screen together, and they squeezed every bit of juice out of it, as they should. I love the fact that it was full-blown rated R. You know, Marvel didn't get cold feet and make it PG-13. It's some of the most irreverent shit that we've seen from Deadpool yet. The action in here is really good. Like, the 2 different fight scenes with Logan and Deadpool are great. I actually really like the whole plot about, was it TSA or TVA or whatever, getting Deadpool and him having like the prime timeline that he has to save. Like, I didn't watch Loki, and so I don't know if there's things that contradict there. But to me, that was enough of a setup to do some hijinks with Deadpool, and so it works for me. All the cameos here are really more like extended cameos, or like side characters, basically. And then you got fucking Blade walking out. Talk about having a boner, man. Like, when that guy walked out, I'm like, oh my God, yes, this is the greatest thing ever. I'm such a Blade fan. That was awesome. I loved seeing Johnny Storm back, and the way that they utilized him was great. You know, Elektra, could have taken or leaving her, but she was pretty cool here. And then you got, of course, Channing Tatum, which was a lot of fun. I thought Daphne Keane coming back was great. So yeah, I absolutely loved this film. I saw it twice in theaters, once with my son, once with my dad. Laughed my ass off both times. I've seen it twice at home since then. I love this movie. Absolutely love this movie. And it might be my favorite Deadpool film. It honestly might. I don't know. I love that first one, but I rewatched all 3 of them after I saw this in theaters. And I'm like, I don't know. I think I might love Deadpool and Wolverine a little bit more. Agatha All Along. I actually saw the first 2 episodes of this in theaters. So the last year when I went to Fantastic Fest, Sean was actually hosting like a press event or a screener for this. And so we went and watched it in theaters, and it was okay. It just didn't really pull me in. Like, Agatha having her own TV show never made sense to me in the first place. And so I was never really that interested, never had any faith in it. And when I saw the first 2 episodes, I was like, okay, like, I don't hate it, but I'm certainly not compelled to keep watching. And I just kind of listened to the chatter as it went on, and, you know, it started to seem like, oh, that's actually pretty good. And then by the end of it, everybody seemed to be very disappointed with it. And they kind of said a lot of the same things they said about all the other shows that I didn't watch, where it's like, it falls apart by the end. It feels like it should have been longer. It feels like it does. I don't know why we're here, and it's kind of weird. And I was like, okay, well, I gotta watch it then. Fuck it. So yeah, I've seen 2 episodes, but overall I'll stick it and haven't seen. What is this? The Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man. I didn't even realize this was part of the MCU. I knew it existed, but yeah, this was on the list to include, but I have not watched it. Captain America Brave New World. So this was the first the first MCU film we got earlier this year. And, you know, this is one that is along the same conversation as Quantumania and the Marvels, only even more so, where I'm actually going to stick this in Multiverse of Meh. People lambasted this movie, and I don't think it's bad. Like, it's got issues. It's got major issues. But I don't think it turns out to be a bad film. It just turns out to be a very disappointing movie, where this is very clearly by a country mile the weakest of the Captain America films. It is not a movie that is deserving of the Captain America name or Anthony Mackie's entrance as the character. And, you know, having a lot of different elements here finally come together was great, but I wish they would have found a more organic way to do it. Now, once you get past those certain things, the fact that this is yet again a movie that feels like it was reshot and retooled and changed, which it was delayed like a year or 2. On its surface, once you get past all of that, I do think there's some really good stuff here. I think Harrison Ford is really good as Thunderbolt Ross. He's kind of the main character of the movie in a lot of ways. Like, he's the one with the main arc. I think Sam is great as Captain America. I like him in the role. I liked his, Falcon stand-in. I don't remember his name, but he was cool. I love the fact that this is basically an Incredible Hulk sequel. That's kind of one of the big problems, is that it's less of a Captain America movie and more of a Hulk movie. But I do like the fact that it's the first film to go back to one of the most underrated films in the entire franchise and finally tie up some of those plot lines that have been dangling. And speaking of that, it's the first movie that starts to bring the universe together, where we're finally going to address the Celestials from Eternals, and we're going to address some of these other things. And it starts to pull these threads together and make the universe feel more cohesive again, at the expense of Captain America having his own focused film. Was that a necessary sacrifice? Maybe. I don't know. I don't know what the original version of this movie looked like. I don't know what I would feel about the universe had this not started to bring some of those things in. It's definitely a movie that is just, it's okay. But I don't think it's one of the worst. I think it's right there in the middle. Now we have a Disney Plus series that I actually have seen. Oh man, it's been a while. Daredevil, Born Again. Now, this is another one where I wish I kind of had a tier between Marvelous and Multiverse of Meh. Because I think meh is too negative of a word to really describe my thoughts on this, but I certainly would not call it marvelous. So I'm actually going to stick it in Multiverse of Meh, but it's very much on the high end of that. I enjoyed this show overall. I think that it was great to have these characters back. The fact that we had a version of this show that did not address the previous 3 seasons, was just going to be its own thing, its own canonical little escape with the same casting, was fucking idiotic. So I'm glad they decided not to go through with that. But unfortunately, what you have here is a show of 2 different visions, where you have the revisited, where they're like, we have to make this Daredevil season 4. This has to follow the other storylines. That takes up a good amount of the season, but you also have a lot of things left over from that first piece of the show that was shot that makes it feel like a little bit of a mixed bag. Now, on the good end, it's wonderful to have these characters back and the actors portraying them, and it's awesome. And I love the storyline going on with them, where Kingpin is now the mayor, and Matt Murdock is hung up the costume, and he's trying not to be Daredevil. He just wants to be Matt Murdock and solve crimes that way as the lawyer. And you have this brewing situation where Wilson Fisk is kind of taking on vigilantes and more or less warns Matt Murdock, like, if you take up your old mantle, like, I'm coming at you hard. I really enjoyed having the Punisher back in here and having Frank Castle back into the story. I think that was great. I love the fact the show is full-blown rated R. Not that every episode is dark and bloody and graphic, but when it goes there, it goes there. The Punisher just absolute stabbing fools left and right, and then you get a scene where Wilson Fisk literally like busts a dude's head in half that was insane. I saw some people call that out as ridiculous, like tonal, like it just did not belong in the show, and I'm like, fuck that, give me more. That was awesome. So yeah, I loved that. And I think that overall, aside from some of the action, which I'll get into, overall the show, I like the look of it. It's getting back somewhat to what the Netflix show had, that kind of dark side of things. I don't think we see very much in this universe, but certainly a brighter version of that. If they had gone full back to the dark and grainy and gritty look, I would absolutely love it. But this, even just being kind of a half step in that direction, I liked it more than I disliked it. The big disappointment here is that, yes, it does feel like a little bit of a cobbled of 2 halves, where you have one show that very much, there's moments where you're like, oh, I'm really digging this. And then there's other times where it's like, this feels weird. These new characters that are here to kind of replace Foggy and Karen, they're not interesting at all. Why don't we just have Foggy and Karen here? What are we doing here? The bank episode is one that I actually thought was interesting. It was kind of like just a Daredevil adventure in the middle of the week, but a lot of other people really disliked that, and that was an episode from the previous iteration, so that one's kind of in the middle for me. But the action here is where the big drop-off was, where, not to say the action's terrible, or there's not, episodes where it's better than others, but one of the best things about the Netflix Daredevil run was that had some of the best fight choreography that we've ever seen. And this just isn't that. This is the bouncy CGI superhero shit that I just didn't find to be very interesting. So anytime it was fight sequences or anything trying to be very dark and gritty in an action sense, I feel like absolutely failed to recapture what we love about Daredevil. But I'm very excited with where things ended off for Born Again Season 2 or whatever they call it. And I think that being able to be recreated entirely from the ground up and not having all these, baggage and problems of this one, I think it's definitely going to be an even better season than this. I just hope they learn their lessons and listen to the criticisms with the way it's shot and with the way that the action was choreographed. If they fix that, this will be top tier Marvel. All right, we're about to close it out. We got Thunderbolts, which was another movie that came out this year, and I really enjoyed this one. This is one that I'm going to stick up in Marvelous. I thought that it was a really surprisingly well done movie for a bunch of characters that I liked, but wasn't necessarily enthralled with to where I wanted a movie from them. But I really enjoyed them as a team. I really liked the overall storyline of having Pullman's son, I forget his name, the first name, but him being this character that they kind of explore mental health with, as well as these the main characters, namely Florence Pugh. The way that the movie very much was themed around that was very interesting. I think overall the action was pretty good here, but this is a movie that's more character driven, and that was good to see them go back to. And it's also a movie that started to make this multiverse saga make sense finally, where you get to the end and it's more or less revealed that they are the new Avengers. Because that's a big question we've had for a long time. It's like, where are the Avengers? Who are the Avengers? Who are we building up to be in the team in this Doomsday movie that's like right around the fucking corner? And the way that this wrapped up, and even they titled it with the star, and after like the first 2 days it was out, they retitled it the New Avengers or whatever. It's Thunderbolts. But them being the new Avengers made a lot of things make sense, where it's like, oh, okay, I'm starting to understand a little bit more now about what we've been doing the last 4 or 5 years. Kind of. So much like with Brave New World, those two movies back to back, it's like, okay, we're starting to make a little bit of sense here, what we're building to. But overall, yeah, very good character-driven movie, and I like the fact that they really explored mental health in a way that was interesting, but didn't like dilute the comic book of it all. So had fun with that one. Ironheart, didn't see it, and that's the last one that's going to be on that list, I promise you. And now we had the Fantastic Four, The First Steps, which is the new one that came out this past weekend, and this is one that I was not nearly as high on as everybody else, but I did really like this one, so we're going to stick this one as our last entry into Marvelous. Now, it's on the lower end of Marvelous, I got to be honest with you. As I said, I'm not somebody that thinks this is like top 5, top 10 Marvel. What I like about it is that I think they nailed the casting. I really enjoyed all 4 of the casting. I like the fact that this movie feels very much like it was a singular vision from a director and a writer. It didn't feel like it had the baggage of the other universes, or it was retooled or reshot or second guessed left and right. It was its own thing, and it shouldn't be something that stands out. But after the last number of movies we talked about, it absolutely does. I think that the special effects were really well done here. The way that they visualized Galactus was cool, finally, instead of making him a cloud. I know everybody hated that. I like some of the banter and back and forth between The Thing and Johnny Storm, and the relationship between Reed Richards and Sue Storm. Sue Storm ended up being the standout of the movie, which is a shock for me. The whole storyline with their son and being the center of what Galactus wants, and them kind of having public backlash was very interesting. The movie's a bit light on action. Like, you get a little bit of, space stuff where they're flying in a ship and they're being chased by the Silver Surfer. You get a little bit of action where they're trying to wrangle up Galactus in the third act, but there's not really a whole lot of Fantastic Four doing Fantastic Four things throughout the first half of the film. There's a little bit of a benefit to ignoring their origins and just starting us at like year 3, year 4, but at the same time, you do miss out on getting to know these characters in a certain way, so it's kind of a wash. And Galactus as a villain, I just don't think is that interesting. I know he's a fan favorite. I know people wanted to see him visualized in a way that's respectful to the character and kind of redeem the Cloud. I think they've done that, but as a character, I just don't find a giant behemoth, robot-looking dude who wants to eat the planet to be a very compelling villain. And he does, because he's so big, he doesn't allow for a very interesting fight sequence in the third act either, even though the stakes are very high. In the movie, I don't even know if I said this in my review, the movie feels very small. Like, Fantastic Four is supposed to be like the protectors of the entire world, and the whole world's fate is at stake, but it kind of feels like we're playing around the same couple of blocks of like one city. So there was a little bit of that too, where it felt like the movie wasn't as epic in scale as it felt like it should have been. So that added in with the fact that I'm just not really inherently a big Fantastic Four guy. I've just never really been that interested in them as characters. Even the best versions that I've seen on screen, which would be them, don't really move the needle a lot for me, like a character like Captain America or Spider-Man or Iron Man. So I liked it. I thought it was good. It's definitely the best Fantastic Four movie that we've gotten, and it's certainly one of the better MCU movies that we've gotten in a while. But yeah, there's people who are much higher on it than I am. But we'll see what happens with Doomsday and all that. I am curious to see the future of these characters. But that's it, guys. That is my tier of the entire MCU. Very top heavy, so I have a lot of ones that I love, ones that I think are really good, and I'm actually surprised. I only have Thor: Love and Thunder in the fuck you tier. So, yeah, that very interesting. So let me know what your guys' favorites and least favorites are down below, or check the video description for the link so you can actually do one of these and tag me in it. And my buddy Sean Chandler over on Sean Chandler Talks About is also doing a ton of these rankings where he's ranking the villains and I believe probably the heroes too. And he's ranked all these a number of times, but he's going to get into a lot more detail than I am. And he's actually watched all the Disney Plus shows. So if you want a little bit more of an elaborate MCU guys take, go check out his. But other than that, we'll revisit this maybe after Avengers Doomsday if it's awesome. If not, a couple of years from now. But for now, this is it. This is my my updated MCU rankings. I hope you enjoyed it. Well, that's it for this one, guys. If you enjoyed that, click over here for a playlist of all of my tier list videos. I go over multiple genres and a bunch of different things, not just comic book films. But if you're just here for the MCU stuff, I'll put a playlist up here of all the films that I actually have reviewed in this universe. Please like, share, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss everything in the future. And as always, remember, opinions are like assholes, but that doesn't mean you have to be.